Lions have always been famously associated with ferocity, violence, and sheer raw power. They are a symbol of the brutality that is inherent to life in the wild. However, while all these things are expected of them already, in 2006 a coalition of 6 lions took the words like violence, brutality, and dominance and raised the bar for all future generations of lions. These 6 lions committed such acts of savagery and put on such a display of power that it exceeded the already high expectations of all who make a living from observing wildlife. Not even the most educated experts on lions could have ever predicted that a coalition of just 6 lions would one day control a territory spanning 170,000 acres. Today, we'll be covering the tale of the infamous Maboko lions, a coalition of 6 brothers originating from the Mala Mala Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands region of Kruger National Park, South Africa. These lions belong to the Sparta Pride of the region. Let us introduce you to each member of the band of brothers. First, we have Makulu, the oldest of the Mapoko brothers. Makulu was the only one out of the 6 that was not their real brother. It is believed that the Sparta Pride lost a cub of the same age, and Makulu joined in and took his place. Normally, a pride would never accept such an intruder, which is why experts believe that Makulu might be the Mapoko's half-brother, his father being from the Sparta Pride and his mother belonging to some other pride. Because of this biological difference, Makulu grew significantly bigger than his brothers and became their leader. Secondly, there is Pretty Boy, named as such because he was a calculated and strategic fighter, which resulted with fewer scars on his face. At number 3, there is Mr. T, named as such because of the distinctive mohawk-shaped mane reminding everyone of the iconic A-Team character. Fourth position belonged to Scar, whether he was named as such to evoke the memory of Simba's uncle or because of the scar on his spine is unclear, probably the latter because he was also known as Skew Spine. At 5th place stood Rasta, aka Dreadlocks, who had something caught in his mane causing it to twirl into dreadlocks. And finally, at number 6, there was Kinky Tail, who simply had a kink in his tail as an identity marker. If you ask me, coolest name in the group, least coolest reason for it. But how did their reign begin? As young lions, these 6 brothers were kicked out of the Sparta Pride in 2006. They started out by scavenging food from lioness hunts. In lion prides, it is the females that take care of the hunting activities, while males are responsible for protecting territories. However, these 6 males quickly became experts in hunting big game such as buffaloes, rhinos, and even giraffes. It was the buffalo hunts where they truly shined, more than any lion coalition before them. Buffaloes are one of the strongest creatures in Africa and weigh between 937 to 1,918 pounds. Not many creatures mess with them unless they're desperate for food or maybe feeling a little extra confident that day. Female lions, weighing about 270 pounds each, known as lionesses, have a hard time taking on buffalo and wouldn't attempt it if they had another choice. However, the Mapoko coalition was composed entirely of males weighing about 420 pounds each. This meant when they wanted some buffalo, they went out and got them some. According to the predator expert Dave Samoni, it was their knack for hunting buffalo that eventually became the pivotal reason for their success. You know how your mother tells you to eat your green vegetables if you want to be big and strong? Well, lionesses tell their children to eat buffalo for the same reason. The Mapoko became some of the biggest and strongest lions of the region. When hunting big game, the Mapoko always worked together. Makulu was the director of the attack, but it was Mr. T and Kinky Tail who were the stars of the show. These two showed a kind of aggression that was rarely seen in lions. Mr. T was so violent that he was even willing to fight his brothers to get a bigger share. Compare this to how you and siblings would fight over the PlayStation controller, except with the possible intention to kill. The first territorial claim of the Mapoko lions came in 2006. The 6 brothers entered the northern Sabi Sands region and challenged the 4-lion coalition that ruled the area. As the 4 dominant lions of the region accepted the challenge, the Mapoko swiftly managed to kill 1, leaving the other 3 no choice but to flee their kingdom. However, the job was not done. Following the victory, the Mapogos went on a search and found 11 cubs of the 4-lion coalition and killed every single one of them, to ensure that their lineage wouldn't go on. The lionesses of the rival pride no longer had any cubs suckling them, and they went into oestrus, which is just a fancy way of saying they were ready to mate again. and the Mapogos were ready to mate. The cycle of violence repeated several times, and in little over a year, the Mapogos had successfully controlled 8 neighboring prides and annihilated over 110 lions. This kill count might be even larger because it was quite hard to keep track. The Mapogo lions had dominance over a huge territory that spanned across 170,000 acres. This was a massacre of proportions never before observed in the wild. For lions, killing the dominant lion is only the first pillar of a successful invasion. The second was to impregnate the females and to pass on their lineage. The Mapogos are known to have fathered cubs in the Sand River Pride, Ottawa Pride, and the Tsalala Pride, and these are just the known ones. It's highly likely they fathered cubs in several other prides too. If killing 110 lions, including the cubs, was not enough, the Mapogos indulged in the never-before-seen act of eating them as well. Cannibalism, particularly of cubs, was never heard of in the world of lions until the Mapogos came around. Mr. T was particularly famous for eating the cubs of his enemies, for which he received the title of Satan. Mr. T would even get into conflicts with his own brothers and eat their cubs too. More on this in a bit. The devastation caused by the 6 brothers left a significant mark that will be felt in the region for years to come. Their reign continued for at least 6 years after their first conquest, and it was reported that the Mapogo brothers had killed about 40% of the lion population in the reserve. Here are the stats of some of the neighboring prides before and after the Mapogos decimated them. Castleton Pride, before 22 lions, after 6 lions. Talala Pride, before 10 lions, after 5 lions. Munvanyane Pride, before 10 lions, after 0 lions. Completely decimated. Since you've made it this far, what do you think of the story of the Mapogo lions? Have you heard of this legend before? Let us know in the comments below. As magnificent and also horrific as the reign of the Mapogo brothers was, all great things come to an end. For the Mapogos, this began when family feuds broke out between Mr. T and Makulu around 2008. After this, Mr. T and Kinky Tail, the 2 most violent members of the group, went their own way to rule the northern region of Mapogos territory. For 2 years, the 2 lions managed to keep a firm grip on their territory, that is, until in 2010 they clashed with the Majinglanes, a coalition of 5 young male lions who were looking for territory to claim as their own. Although their story may sound like a similar start to the Mapogos, their reign is less remarkable. The 2 Mapogos managed to isolate and kill the youngest of the Majinglanes, but eventually Kinky Tail ran into the remaining 4 Majinglanes by himself. Having been a dominant lion his whole life, Kinky Tail had no concept of fear and took on all 4 young and ambitious lions by himself. A terrible idea. The Majinglanes soon had him pinned to the ground, where they violently tore him into pieces. Wildlife researchers who witnessed the horrific scene eventually heard a gunshot-like snapping sound. This was the sound of Kinky Tail's spine being snapped, and this was his final blow. Mr. T eventually arrived to defend his brother, however he had no chance against 4 lions and was chased off. What followed was another horrific spectacle. The 4 Majinglanes began eating Kinky Tail while he was still breathing. By the time he took his last breath, they had already digested most of his rear legs. Mr. T surrendered his territory and went back to his brothers to rejoin them. It seemed he was peacefully coexisting with them for a while, but he was named Satan for a reason. It was soon discovered that he was eating the cubs of his brothers when they were not around to stop their lineage, and to mate with the females of his choice. Rasta was believed to be killed by poachers, and Scar was shot by the locals after he tried to leave the Sabi Sands Reserve. In March 2012, Mr. T fell victim to another coalition of lions known as Salatus. Just like his brother Kinky Tail, he found himself in an uneven match against 3 young, eager lions. He was found severely injured with a deep bite wound in his back that paralyzed him from the waist down, and several other injuries all over his body. Following this event, there were only 2 Mapogos left of what was once a glorious band of brothers. The now older lions, Pretty Boy and Makulu, left their territory, forfeiting it to the Salatis. The last time they were seen together was in November 2012, doing what they did best, feeding on a buffalo. The last sighting of a Mapogo was of Makulu, all alone in his homeland of Malamala in 2013. At this point, Makulu was 15 years old. This is almost 90 or more in human years. The terrible and horrific reign of the Mapogos was at an end, but it had changed the face of the Sabi Sands and the Kruger National Park region forever. See you later.